I think the common thread between all of these conversations is finding someone that values you, sees you, appreciates you, and is kind. And I talk to my single girlfriends that have this checklist, like, he's got to be over 6 feet tall. And I'm like, literally none of that matters. It is totally not important to finding a life partner. You want someone that you can build a life with. And I think that all of your stories really highlight that. Hello. It's Brooke Devard, and you're listening to the Naked Beauty Podcast. Today's episode is very special. I first invited Elaine Welteroth, who is an acclaimed, award-winning journalist, New York Times bestselling author, and now the founder of the Birth Fund, which is an incredible nonprofit working to address the gap in maternal care for families across the country. I invited her on to talk about our experience as moms. I am currently 33 weeks pregnant. I believe she's 35 weeks pregnant. What that basically means is we're 8 months into this 9-month pregnancy. It's both of our second pregnancies. So I wanted to have her on to talk about our pregnancy experiences. But then, as luck would have it, it just so happened that her mom was in town and my mom was in town. So we figured, let's make this a really iconic episode. Let's have our moms join us on the podcast. And I am so excited to ask both my mom and her mom wisdom from their many, many years of experience, both mothering and with career. If you all have been listening to Naked Beauty, you've heard my mom, Jerri Devard, on the podcast before. This is going to be such a treat, and I'm so looking forward to getting into it. So without further ado, I will welcome my guests and we will jump into the episode. Okay, we've got a lot of collective maternal wisdom on this couch, on these couches. So I'm really excited about this conversation. Elaine, you were my initial guest, and you've had such an incredible career across journalism, television, and now the work that you're doing with the Birth Fund. You moved to Los Angeles when?
4 years ago now.
4 years ago? Okay.
Yeah, but it went by in a blur. It was in the pandemic, so
okay,
time is a construct.
And had a baby boy.
Yes.
Who's now a toddler.
Like you.
Yes. And now I've started this incredible organization. And your mother is in town. My mother is in town. And we are both like a month away. You're closer to your due date than I am.
Yeah, 3 weeks.
3 weeks.
It's go time.
It's go time. So when you pitched the idea of, okay, why don't we have our iconic moms join us on this episode of Naked Beauty? I was like, this is why you were the editor-in-chief that you were, because the brain is thinking of these brilliant ideas. So I'm so excited because, as you all know, on Naked Beauty, we talk about self-care and beauty, but so much of that comes from our mothers. And I would imagine that a lot of what you all learned was from your mothers. So I actually want to start with a question for the moms, which is about, I think, most traditionally, I hear people ask, what beauty tips did you learn from your mother? And people talk about seeing their, mother apply lipstick. But I actually want to hear what self-care tips you learned from your mother. And did you see your mothers indulging in self-care as a practice for them?
Oh, my goodness, no. I did not see my mother indulge in self-care. I just remember her being a hard worker in terms of having to be at work at 6 a.m., Monday was her day off, and I remember when we'd be walking home from school, I could smell the pine sol from the corner. So her day off was not a day off.
She spent it cleaning?
Yes, cleaning, ironing, and I mean ironing sheets, okay? She really was, she amazed me, that especially now. But even then, it was amazing to me. She'd make a full-fledged meal. Of course, we wound up eating that meal quite a few days. But, it was like Sunday dinner. And she had the house thoroughly clean and just to be prepared to keep going. I don't believe she started her self-care journey until we were gone.
Wow. And where did you grow up, Deborah?
I grew up in Rochester, New York.
Okay. So she worked all week, and then her day off, it was just home care, no bubble baths.
Home care and us. Oh, no. No. She was not a bubble bath kind of girl. The most time that I felt like she spent any time on herself, probably Sunday morning, getting ready for church. Yeah, that would be the most time that she would take time with her face and her clothes. And her outfit. Another thing I admired about her is her hips and legs. And she would if she wore close-fitting things, and I was so thin, I just thought, one day I hope to have that figure.
You have an amazing figure. You have the smallest waist. I'm sure people do. Elaine, do people tell your mom all the time?
Oh my gosh, all the time. I mean, I tell her, I'm like, do you know how many people pay for this BBL and
exactly.
this
the
waistline?
hourglass situation?
But you know, it makes her she's so modest.
Right.
So she's so like not about drawing attention to herself or her body. It always, look at her. She wants to like die right now. She's like, stop talking about my body. But you probably inherit that from your family too. Just that sense of modesty. And
definitely. My mother, from my maternal line for sure, the modesty, but and also my physique, I primarily get from my father and grandfather. On the paternal side, they were tall and thin, and I just remember my grandfather talking to me about his work day. There was none of these 8 hours. It was sun up to sundown, and they were outside and they were hustling and they were using their body. And so to me, part of my modesty is they earned this body. I just inherited it. Because as my husband said, I was a couch. What did he said? A desk jockey. I worked for 43 years behind a desk. So I think that I know that contributes to my modesty about my body.
I waited until I could have a baby to try to have this like hourglass. I was like, when is my booty coming in? When are my hips and thighs coming?
Right. The body does change.
It does. After that baby, I was like, yes. I feel like everybody was waiting for the Debra Welteroth gene to
pass down.
Yeah. Although I then lost it 2 years later. So I don't know. I'm hoping to get it back the second time around.
It'll come back.
Anyway.
Mom, what about you? What did you observe in terms of grandma and self-care?
Well, first I have to jump in on the Deborah Welteroth body thing here because
this is not the topic.
Right. Well, she doesn't have to talk about her body because other people are going to talk about her body. So, and it's beautiful because, the thing about it is that I think a lot of people inherited, good genes and parents that worked, but you have to take, like you said, you have to take care of what you've, received. And you're obviously doing a very good job of taking care of what you've received.
Thank you.
I'm passing it on. So, because Elaine, you're holding it down too. You're holding it down. And when you asked that question, Brooke, about what did I observe for self-care, I had the exact reaction that Deborah had, right? About, I never saw that. And I think maybe it's generational. I think it is because that was not something that you talked about. That was not something that you luxuriated in was self-care. You were about getting your kids out the door, getting sure the house was clean. There was food on the table. Exactly. There was no time for like bubble baths and facials and eye masks and nails, and all of that.
Absolutely not.
But my mom looked good, right? Yeah. My mom made sure that she looked good. And I would say the closest thing to self-care that I saw was her using, Pond's cold cream, at night or to take off her makeup. That was it. And she just found a way. She always cared about the way she looked when she left the house, as did my grandmother.
Exactly.
And that came from, I remember being a young girl, born and raised in New York City and coming down south, which is what you did for the summer.
Yes.
And, my grandmother would say, you are going to get dressed to go downtown because you have to look good because people treat you the way you look. So you couldn't roll in there with a T-shirt or whatever the equivalent of that was back then. We were like dressed like Easter Sunday every time we left the house.
Yes.
Socks were clean, shoes were, sparkling, hair was laid.
Yes.
And so that was what I observed, and that's what my mom did, and that's what my grandmother did. Yes. But my mom did take the time on her clothes. She was very particular about what she wore and what she bought and how she put it together. She had an amazing sense of style, but self-care was not something that was even in the set of consideration of what you would do for yourself.
Yes. And what was important for both of you about raising Black and mixed race daughters?
Well, I raised a Black girl.
Yes.
So, and right, I'm going to talk from my example.
Okay.
Right.
Yes.
The thing about it is that I wanted, and you will recall this, we would sit around the dinner table and we would talk about the things that affected us growing up, like the things that affected even you. We would take a copy of the New York Times and we would look at what was on the cover. And invariably there was something that had something to do with race. And I would ask you and your brother, what do you think about that? And I was trying to invoke, your father and I were trying to invoke a sense of what you read and what actually happens. And a lot of that had to do with police protection or lack thereof, police brutality or lack thereof, the representation of Black people in media, and trying to give you a sense of confidence in who you are, that you were not only good enough, but that you were more than enough, because the world was going to tell you that you weren't. And so your father and I were always over-rotating on how good you were. You know, that call and response that we always had.
Yes.
I'd say, Brooke, what are you?
I am special.
And you had to say that over and over again because I knew the world was going to tell you or try to make you think that you weren't. So I think it was always instilling in you and your brother a sense of understanding that you were Black before someone else made that something negative about you, wearing that as a sense of pride and understanding where your people had come from, and not no one making you feel small about your skin or your life or what you loved.
Yes. And Elaine, one thing that we have in common is we both grew up in majority white environments and from school. And in your book, More Than Enough, you talk about struggling a little bit with that identity. So I'm really curious actually to hear from both you and your mom about how you instilled a sense of confidence in Elaine's identity. And then Elaine, what that experience was like for you.
Well, I think that was very interesting that your point and my point with my children. First of all, with my children, I did not have the reinforcement of my family. My African-American family was 3,000 miles away. And that was my biggest concern when my husband and I married. I wanted to make sure that they knew who they were. And also how they'd be perceived when they got a little bit older and they would send the paper home about what race to sign. And I would always check this. And so when they could read, they're like, why did you check that?
What?
Black.
Yes.
I checked black. I'm sorry. Anyway. And I said, because they're like, what about Dad? I said, what about Dad? When they look at you, they're going to see me. So, and they're like, well, we're not, I'm like, well, then you fill out yourself. And they did. They filled it out themselves. But back.
And we would check both.
Check back. That's right. I didn't know what you did. I just knew you took over. And I was like, okay, they'll figure it out. Sooner or later, real life is going to point it out to them. And it did. But back to the very beginning. One of the things that was important for me, my parents were raised in the South, the segregated South. And unlike what I feel like some households did, my parents did not raise me to think that to vilify white people. Their point was, you are as good as anybody. There are good Black people. There are bad Black people. There are good white people. There are bad white people. And you will know the difference. They kind of helped me get that radar and know that, remember that song, Smiling Faces Tell Lies?
They're too young. Tell. They don't know nothing about that, but I know it. I know that song.
Brooke just smiling now. Just Brooke smiling now.
I know that song.
So
they don't tell truth. There you go.
That's right. And it's not, and so that matters, period, whoever you're dealing with. So meeting my husband and his family, they were real. His mother and I had so much more in common. And I knew that these people were real in terms of not having race be something that was a negative for them.
And what's his background?
His background is German-Irish.
Okay.
My mother-in-law was
very
Irish.
White.
Yes, the bluest eyes you've ever seen. And I remember, the Malcolm X, what did he say? The blue-eyed devil? I'm like, oh, what have I done? But, the heart wants what the heart wants. And
sleeping with the enemy.
And I did. I had it was not my vision at all. I remember when Diana Ross married a white guy and I thought, well, he is cute, so maybe if I went a white guy, he might look like that, dark hair, dark, whatever. And Jack comes along with the blonde hair, blue eyes, surfer dude. Something that had never crossed my mind, but he's got a heart of gold. And it was really, when we did get together, and I was concerned about the race thing. He's never had to be concerned about that. And he was honestly not very, he was ignorant about it, really, unrealistic even. But he said, when we were going to have children, he said, we will raise them with love. And it just, melted my heart. He has a way of melting my heart. So that was true. Yes, we did raise them with love, but I also wanted to raise them with wisdom. And part of that wisdom involved knowing who they were. And I wanted them to make sure, just because they didn't have the cousins that I had to help me feel safe in my skin and confident in my Blackness, I knew that it was going to be on me to make sure that they had that. So I did make the effort to raise them in an African American church. It wasn't always positive for them like I expected it to be. But I have had friends in California that, as a matter of fact, my best friend is, we're what's similar is she was raised in like Florida, and we had kind of the same background. And so she's got a very strong African American presence, and her kids embraced my kids. And so it was important to me. I would talk to them. I would have Ebony magazine, Essence magazine, things like that would encourage them. I even found, through Essence magazine and Ebony, I could get reading material and things that were available that had pictures of little brown-skinned children. And I even found a book that talked about, biracial children or whatever. But it was very important to me that they knew who they were and that both sides were equally good and positive, and that they weren't to be put down by anybody, that they needed to have that self-confidence.
That's beautiful.
This is beautiful. I already love this episode. I feel like I'm listening as a listener.
Yes.
I'm like, what was my question again? I don't even know. What can I even add to that? I mean, as you talk about that, I reflect on this story that I have shared this before, but not in a really long time. I remember my first memory in preschool being othered and feeling like for the first time, oh, I'm different from everybody, and not feeling proud about that. And I remember it came through this preschool assignment where all the kids were asked to make a collage of their families. And they brought all these magazines out filled with all these white folks.
Wow.
And I'm flipping through the magazines and I'm watching everybody else get to work. They're cutting out, they're going. And I'm like, I don't see anyone who looks like my mom. I don't see anybody who looks like me or my brother. I see lots of options for white daddies. And so I chose the Men's Warehouse version of my dad, like briefcase, like suited, booted, slicked hair, which my dad was a carpenter. So there was nothing truthful about that. But I remember cutting out my dad and then making the decision after looking around and surveying the room to just do what everyone else was doing, which is cut out white people.
Wow.
And so I made this family collage full of white people that the teachers then saw, and they're like, this is awkward. So I remember a teacher coming over and trying to redirect me to this little black girl who looked nothing like me. I think it was like a pancake. It was like an Aunt Jemima ad.
Lord.
And it was like a little girl with pressed hair, dark skin, it just nothing like me. And I just remember I froze her out. I just acted like I didn't hear her because I didn't want my difference to be highlighted. I just wanted to pretend to be white. I thought that I could get away with that on the paper. And then that collage came home. And this woman took one look at that, and she was like, oh, her famous line is, Houston, we got a problem. And so she rounded up my brother and I, and we were told to sit down at the dinner table, and she whipped out a gang of Ebony and Essence magazines, spread them all over the table, and she said, we are going to redo this assignment together as a family. You will be replacing this little white girl and that little boy. And my brother had to do the assignment too. And we did. And my mom taped she let me keep my little businessman dad, even though that was a lie too, because he came home covered in dust as a carpenter every day. But she let me keep him. And then she put that collage on my wall next to my bed so that it was the first thing I saw every day and the last thing I saw every night. And she was Beautiful. Like, this is who you are. This is who you will be proud of. And it really reinforced that sense of pride. Yeah. I had that at home. I got that at home. It was instilled in me from an early age. There was a counter narrative coming at me strong from my mom that really did challenge some of the messages that I was getting just intrinsically. It's something you feel it in this country. It's not something that needs to be told to you. Eventually it will be in different ways, but it was a quiet sense of my inferiority. And my mom constantly countered that. And I just feel so grateful. I mean, I feel grateful that I have an example of Black womanhood that I can reference from the time I was born.
Right.
One that is beautiful and elegant and sophisticated and smart and powerful and gentle and all these amazing things. Like my mom is like, I mean, if I could be half the woman she is, then I've done something. So like, I feel like, so I just feel like I'm less exposed, I'm less vulnerable to allowing messages from the media to influence how I see myself when I'm raised with somebody like this, you know? But I do think about like, as a Black woman or as a woman, as a mixed race person, if I had a white mother, would that be different? Would I be searching outside of my household for that sense of like identity and I don't know, she was my mirror. I had that.
Yes.
So I really feel blessed and I feel anchored by the kind of mom that I had. It's made such a difference in my life. And it's not to say that I didn't have like an identity crisis or two, you know, like I think those are inevitable.
Yes. So I was going to ask about the inevitability because my son, like you, has an experience that's not my experience and it's not my husband's experience.
Yeah.
So in a lot of ways, neither of us can fully relate to what it is like to be truly biracial, mixed race.
Yeah.
Is there something isolating about that? And two, is there an inevitability that it will be something that he struggles with no matter what we do at home?
It's hard to say. It's hard to speak for Mavi's generation because I do think this is a very different world.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For my generation, our generation, I think we were raised in a very Black and white world. So you had to check a box.
Yeah.
And you had to pick a lane culturally, socially. Which group are you hanging out with? Which table are you sitting at?
Right.
And I've always been a chameleon. So I feel like I was able to, my friends were predominantly white growing up because that was the pool that I grew up in.
Yeah.
But when we got into high school and there were more Black folks, I remember feeling like, oh, suddenly I'm like the Black girl that hangs out with the white girls. Like I'm the token Black friend. And like, they're not messing with me. Like the Black girls weren't trying to mess with me. And I felt like I started to feel that conflict of like living between two worlds. But ultimately I joined the STEP team.
Yes.
And that was my access pass.
That's blackity black. STEP team.
But you know what's so funny is like I was also a cheerleader.
Okay.
So I would literally
has a balance.
Yeah, this is like the epitome of code switching in a sartorial sense. I would literally at like football games, basketball games, I would do my cheerleading thing with all the white girls. There were a couple Black girls on the team, like Victoria won, I think.
Yeah.
And then I would run under the bleachers, change into my STEP uniform.
Oh my God.
And then run out to the middle of the field with all the Black girls and do my, you know what I mean? And you know what's so funny? Of all the things I've done in my life, the thing that my dad will tell you he's the most proud of is that step thing you did. That you have
Nothing
so
like
much
a good
rhythm.
step show.
He's like, that is amazing. Yeah, like literally, I could meet like Michelle Obama and have a conversation, and he's just like
The clap and stomp.
the clap and the stomp on the beat. That was really good. So anyway, I feel in our generation there was like you had to choose which lane you were going to be in, and for my brother who's less interested in being a chameleon, he's a total rebel. He came out the womb as a punk rocker. He had a 6-inch green mohawk. He would wear chip black nail polish and Marilyn Manson shirts and leather jackets with like studs. And my mom and him would butt heads every Sunday because he wanted to wear that to church. And she was just like,
Black
no,
church?
you're not. Black church.
Oh yeah, no.
Like Southern Baptist
Yeah, right.
church.
Oh,
and
yeah.
he was not embraced by the Black community because he did not conform to the norms of our community. But at the same time, he was like the only brown kid with a green mohawk in the mosh pits of the Bay Area. So,
Right.
But as you said, you eventually, it doesn't matter what culture or community you feel more comfortable around that you opt into. Ultimately, the world will
Tell you.
decide
Yep.
and tell you who you are and how you're seen. And when my brother was followed by the police and pinned down to the ground violently because he was misidentified for a criminal a block from our house, it didn't matter that he hung out with white people.
Right.
It didn't matter that he listened to punk rock music. He is a Black man in America.
Yes.
And that is the wake-up call that you get as a Black person, as a person of color. And so I think those realities are still ever present. So I hope Mavi has a different experience. He also, I think socioeconomics plays a part as well. I mean, he's going to grow up in a really nice neighborhood at a private school. You know, maybe he will be sheltered from some of that, but I hope by the time he's driving his car, he will be safer than we were, than our brothers were. And I hope that he has enough of a sense of pride instilled by his strong grandmother, his strong Black mother, that he will never feel like he has to disassociate from his Blackness in order to be accepted or to feel good about himself. I just can only say that I hope that for him.
Yes.
You know, I was going to say, Brooke, it's interesting listening to Elaine. I remember your father and I distinctly having conversations with your brother, Alexander, around hanging with his white friends and being in a store, and if one of them shoplifted, they were going to come for him.
Yeah.
That if there was ever an altercation, that he was going to be the one that people were going to assume had done it. If they were out, if there were girls around and something went down, it was always going to be him. And so I had to tell him, your father, that he was different and that there were things that were going to come to him that wouldn't come to his friends. And so that he had to walk around knowing that. And I'd like to think that will change. I don't know. I mean, I think about Derek Bell's book, Faces at the Bottom of the Well, The Permanence of Racism, and the fact that there will always be this class that wants to feel that for them to rise, they have to step on someone. But as long as we are armed with that and understand that is not something that you can use against me, that I see you coming, I'm ready for it, and try somebody else or something else, because that's not going to work, then I think that we're doing our job.
Yes.
I agree with that, because I do know, I feel like what you said is something that we experience with my son. It's like, I've never been a Black male and my husband's never been a Black male. And what he is going to experience, what he is experiencing, we can't closely identify with, but we can at least arm him with the security that we understand whatever he is going through. If he can communicate it to us, that we've got his back. And I do remember one incident that I'll never forget. My son was called the N-word at school, grammar school, and the principal called my husband, not me. Thought that he was going to get washed over or whatever. I think they wanted to expel Eric or whatever. My husband went down to the school and said, "Oh no, you see, I'm the one that told him if anybody calls him the N-word, that he's to take them out. If they come for him."
That's white dad advice, by the way. That's like not necessarily the advice you get from a Black man, but.
And he did teach, he taught him to defend himself. Because my son's he is a gentle person. He's not violent. That's not his first thing, but you have to teach someone you have to be able to defend yourself, number one. And the most important thing is for Jack, he's never been called the N-word, but he learned, that I made sure he knew one thing will not happen in this house. That's not going to, some Black households use that word. We did not.
Certainly not.
And we will not use that in my household. And so that's how it is a negative. I don't care who says it. So for this little white boy to say that to my son, and for them to think that they were going to kick my son out of school and let the little white boy come back, my son said, "Oh no." My husband said, "Oh no. If he goes, they both go." My son doesn't have to apologize for doing something
Defending himself.
Exactly. And so it's something I hope your son doesn't have to deal with, but most importantly, make sure that he has the tools and the understanding that he is to be respected for who he is and who his people are.
Absolutely.
I will say there's a measure of white privilege that my dad exercised for his son to go up to the school to raise his voice at a white principal is not something my mom could have done. It's not something a Black father could have done without having major consequences potentially. The way my dad
He's got a big voice. He's got a deeper voice than me.
Yeah.
That's what did it,
So it's interesting, though, to think about that dynamic. And, like, if that is what manhood is being modeled to my brother, and my brother goes out in the world and tries to behave in some of these similar ways, he's going to be met with resistance in a different way.
Yes.
You know, they allowed my dad to talk like that. They conceded to his demands. He got my brother off.
Yes.
I just don't think that would have been the case if he were a Black man in America.
Absolutely.
Defending his son in the same exact way.
Well, this is a really interesting segue into my next topic, which is partnership and how important it is to choose the right partner. So you both have been married for how long? How many years?
41.
42.
Okay, 41 years of marriage, 42 years of marriage. So for young people listening that are trying to find a partner or find a mate, or people that have been or are married already and early in their marriage, why do you think it is so important to find a life partner, and what did you look for in your partners?
This is going to be juicy.
You know, why it's important to find a life partner is that, you know, we are meant to have people in our lives that really care about us deeply, unconditionally. And I think back to all the things that I've done that have been special in my life, and I can certainly trace it back to who I chose to marry and build a life with. And that I think that my life would have been very different it would have been different had I married someone else, because certain things would have come out. And I believe that for me, I think strongly back to my mom and the kinds of things, even though my mom was married 3 times, right?
Yes.
I learned a lot from watching what not to do. And each time she was very clear around what happened, right? And so the first time my mom wanted to go back to school. My father wanted to keep her in a box because she had moved to New York to take care of a very sick aunt. And she met my father. She'd only done 1 year of college when she was, you know, as the oldest girl, tapped to come to New York. And she wanted to go back to school once she had my brother and I. And he said, no, you don't need to go back to school. You're my wife. That should be enough. She said, I want to go back to school. And so that kind of created a rift. My father also, you know, my mom was a victim of, you know, domestic violence, right? So my father, to keep her in her place, because my mom was beautiful and smart, and he was very intimidated by that. He was jealous, very, very, very jealous, didn't want her to leave the house. And he just kind of preyed on all of her insecurities around being Southern. Her beauty was kind of used as a weapon against her, and her brains were like, you got enough. And so when she kind of came into her own and summoned the strength to say that I deserve more than this, she left. And my brother and I went and lived with my grandparents, and she went back to school and she got her undergraduate degree, her 4-year degree. She got her master's degree, her EDD, and her PhD.
That's wonderful.
And she did all that without a partner, right? With all of just her energy to say, for a better life for myself and my children, this is what I need to do. And so, you know, leaving my father, she met someone when she was in graduate school that she thought would be perfect. He wasn't. And I remember she put all, you know, that waiting to exhale, she put all his stuff out in the garage. She didn't light a match to it, but all his stuff was, you know, outside. And then she met my stepfather, who she's been married to now like 50 years. And they've got a great relationship. He is 101. And still active and smart and sharp as a tack. My mother will turn 90 in a few months, and she is amazing. So it was really, for me, the partner. And the joke is, in our family, it's not a joke, it's actually the fact that my mom picked my husband. We were at a function, he was there. I kind of had on some stiletto heels, and, you know, this outfit. I'm tripping along the deck, and my heel got caught. And I went to fall back, and he caught me. And then he sat me down. He said, "Are you okay?" It's very romantic, very romantic. "Are you okay?" And my mom comes over. You know, she's still in everybody's business. I always say that. "Who's that?" She's like, "He's a nice guy. He's a really nice guy," because he was very attentive. And so, you know, as I got to know him, and I was young. I met my husband when I was very young. Yeah. And I think that, back to your original question, Brooke, it's important I think it's everything. I think where you are in your life has everything to do with who you choose to share it with. Because your parents can instill in you great values. You know, my grandmother used to say, "Do right, fear not," which is very true. I say that to this day. If you're doing the right thing, you don't have anything to worry about. But who's in that day-to-day, your kitchen cabinet, when something's going down? It's like, I come home from work, I said, "Do you know what they did?" He'd be like, "Okay, Jerry, now wait a minute. Now you know how you are. This is a better thing to do." He was like a better angel, but he's just an amazing human being. I married a guy that I never would have met had I not been in a situation with my mom, because he's such a great guy. And I always thought I'd marry like a Nathan Detroit kind of, okay, it's an old out analogy.
Who's that?
I know nobody knows. You know Nathan Detroit. You don't know. Okay, Nathan Detroit is a character in Guys and Dolls. He walked into the room. He looked good. Everybody thought he was handsome, wanted him, but he was no good. Mm-hmm. And when I was in college, I dated a lot of good-looking guys that were not good for me, but everybody else wanted them. And so when you found someone that was handsome and smart and kind and cared about people, that to me was the juggernaut. And so I lucked out. But my point is that when you find someone that you do have that relationship where you can align on values and interest and ambition and kindness and goodness and, you know, in religion, it was just the perfect match. And I'll say that I didn't think that I'm Devard because I didn't want to change my name in case it didn't work out. So I didn't go into this thinking that it would last this long. I was like, well, he's a good guy. Let's see. And then along the way, I realized that, yes, I love him more today than I did yesterday.
Yes.
And it's a good thing.
Sweet. That is beautiful.
So sweet.
Love that love story.
Me too.
Deborah, what was important to you about picking a partner?
Well, as you mentioned, I too married young. And at the time, there's also another thing that you said was important. The values, you know, where you are at that time. Jack was so open and honest, and it encouraged me because I have what did my daughter say about being, you know, a modest or holding back? He was just such a free spirit. I found that to be so attractive and freeing for me because I was raised in such a closed manner, and I kept myself in that closed manner until, you know, he just a walk on the wild side, you know. And he was just so much fun, and he always we could laugh, and yet the things that were important to us, like faithfulness, you know, being true to one another, being honest, and he's caring and nurturing and loving and warm, and we can disagree in ways that, like, I remember my mother coming and visiting and saying, you told him whatever? I'm like, yeah, because it was the truth. You know, they were the Southern Belles, or like whatever their husband said. It was like, no, I knew I wasn't going to do that. I was raised by a very chauvinistic father. So I was definitely not going to get involved with anyone who was, you know, I'm up here and you're here. Mm-hmm. And my mother always had an attitude when there was a problem that, you know, as far as being physically abused, that wasn't going to happen to her. So in my mind's eye, it's not going to happen to me. So I wasn't worried about any of that. And he wasn't that kind of person. You know, he can be, you know, the name Welteroth, we were told, meant world of fire. So he can be a little spicy sometimes. But we ultimately always come back to the fact that we really love each other. His mother was very nurturing, and she used to talk about him all the time. I got to say, she sold him very well.
She worked with my dad's mom for years before she.
Oh, wow.
My grandma, my dad's mom, introduced them and hooked them up.
Okay.
And
I worked with her. And,
I would have lunch with her and tell her all these things that I was going through. And then one day she's like, well, Deb, you know, my Jackie. I'm like, Pat, I've got enough trouble in my life. I don't need a white boyfriend. Thank you very much. I love you, honey, and everything, but you got to be kidding. And here we are, 42 years later. Thanks, Ma. No, it's as I mentioned earlier, you know, she was so easy to love, and it turned out he was as easy to love. His sisters, I was just embraced by them with such a honest and clear mutual respect and also the same values, you know. The other thing that got me is, you know, my parents and pets. We would have a pet, and the next thing we know, they'd disappear, you know. No big deal. Jack, as a bachelor, had these two cats, Lumpy and Blondie Rutherford. And Blondie we were dating. It wasn't even a year yet. And he called me at like midnight. He goes, I'm a grandpa. Blondie had kittens, and I was
how could you not love that?
That's exactly how I felt. I'm like, he is such a sweetheart.
Sensitive soul.
It was too cute. And, he just kind of carried that into our relationship. And then especially with our children, my husband lost his dad when he was he 17 or 21, whatever. His dad died at 54. It's the short story. Now I realize how young that was. Lost his brother. His brother was 31. So when I gave birth to Eric Charles, it was like his whole new opportunity to have his male bonding situation. He would come home from work, that job as a carpenter, take a shower, put on his pajamas, and just hold his little son and talk to him. And I'm just like all over again, And whenever they got sick, there's only certain parts of nursing that I can do. The heavy hitting parts, like, oh, is there vomit involved? Jack!
Liquids. You don't do liquids.
No. He would take care. He was such a good caregiver to them, and when they were little, and when they were ill, and when I'm ill, he takes care of me. I just, in many ways, I love him more, and it just started from that. That's the best part of him. His heart is still who he's always been. So That's beautiful. We're opposites, but there's that thing that in the things that matter most, that last. That's what I would say you would look forward to, laughing
together.
Yeah.
And Elaine, I have 2 questions for you. One, how did you know that Jonathan was the one for you and the person to build your life with? And then my second question is, I'm curious how your relationship has changed for better and worse since having a child.
How did I know Jonathan was the right one? I think that, like you, I kissed enough frogs, aka bad boys.
Like you being me, Jerry.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
You. When you were talking about what was the reference? The guy, the bad boy.
Oh, the bad boy. I said Nathan Detroit.
Detroit. I had a couple Nathan Detroit.
Right. Okay.
And Jonathan is so the opposite of that. And so I think Jonathan and I met when we were 12 in church. And I remember seeing him. He has like glasses. He used to wear these big glasses. He was going to an all boys prep school. And he was like going to go to Stanford. He was going to be a doctor. And I was just like, oh, what a nice guy. Like, he's going to make someone else such a nice husband one day,
We call those NGB, nice guy butt.
Yeah, nice guy butt. He was a nice guy butt. And so I just wasn't checking for him or that type. You know what I mean? Yeah. He was just more square in my mind. And I was over here dating
Nathan Detroit.
Yeah. For a really long time. Like, I was with my first love, we were together from like, I was in 9th grade all the way through like half of my college years. Wow. And let's just say, I was a ride or die chick. And at some point I was like, do I really have to die? You know what I mean?
Finally.
Like, I think I'm going to get off here, you know?
Yes.
Yes, there was a jail stint. There was a lot that went on there. And so by the time I think I matured and was like in the world, I was looking for very different things. And I had my heart broken by the archetypes that I was told to go after or to feel like excited about, you know? Like, I think we were raised in the Sex and the City generation. Yes. So we were raised to be looking for the big.
Of course.
Like the money bags, the like the banker.
Yeah.
The guy in the suit, like the Men's Warehouse version of my dad. You know what I mean?
Right.
And I got that, and it was not all that it was cracked up to be. And so by the time Jonathan came around, I think I had been humbled enough. My heart had been broken enough for me to see what really matters in a partner to me. Right. And like, I think all of that I had inherited about what to seek out in a partner had like, I'd tried it didn't work. And when I re-met Jonathan as adults, when we were like we were like 26, and he came to New York for a job interview, and had just like hit me up on Facebook, which is like so random. I'd never even checked my Facebook messages. But he asked do we want to get drinks? I remember like going and being like, oh yeah, that what is the acronym?
NGB.
That NGB. That NGB from church. All right, what else am I doing? I'll go have a drink with him, and then do something else the rest of the night. And then when I sat with him, I felt like I was at home. in his company. I felt like this ease. I felt like my nervous system was instantly calm. And I found myself laughing and telling jokes and being like the version of myself that I am with my best friends, and like just more colorful, more sparkly, big, and he could not just handle it. He was like, we had such an incredible dynamic and banter. And so like those drinks became dinner. The dinner became dessert. The dessert became, you want to go across the street and have another drink. And then it was like, we ended up, being invited to the same party that we thought we were going to split ways and go to two different parties. And then we looked at the invitation. We're like, this is the same party. Let's go together. Wow. By the way, it was a ghetto gastro party. And to this day, I have to give John Gray credit because that night turned into like one of those 3 a.m. New York City nights where it's like, we went after that to hookah and like karaoke, and it was just wow. And I remember sitting there and being like, I cannot believe that you are the same guy
from church.
With the glasses. We were 12 years old. Our moms have been in the same church choir since we were 12. They stand next to each other. Literally for the last 25 years, they have stood next to each other in the church choir. And here we are smoking hookah, singing at the top of our lungs in New York City at 3 a.m. Like, this is crazy. And I'm just like, I went so far away from home to find something so different, only to find exactly what was there for me at home the whole time. And he just brought that sense of home to my life, which was just very different than the life that anybody lived from where I came from. You know what I mean? So it was nice to have a piece of home with me. And I still feel like that with him. I feel that is that intangible X factor that it sets your heart at ease. And it's something you can't even articulate, but you know it when you feel it. And there's nothing performative about our love. There's nothing that I feel like I need to do to earn his love. It's just like built in, and it's a friendship. It's a best friendship. Really, that's what it is. It's at the core of it. It's like, that's my guy. Like, that's my people. Like, he's my favorite human on the planet. You know, like if like, for me, marriage was sort of like, okay, if we have to, like, I'm not changing my last name. Okay. That's going a little too far. You know what I mean? And I think I'm a modern woman. And so for me, marriage didn't sit in the same place that it did when I was maybe 25. And I still was like very much in the Carrie Bradshaw era, where it's like, you want to be chosen and you want like the big ring and you want like the big Oscar de la Renta or Vera Wang. Like, I was just not in that mindset when I was like, what I want is to feel like this in my body.
Yes.
For as long as possible. And if it's because of you, with you, let's ride this as long as we can. But I don't ever want to feel trapped by like golden handcuffs. I don't want to feel like I've committed to the commitment. I want us to always be evolving, and I want us to help each other evolve. And if at any point we don't feel like we can do that together, I want there to be an out. Like, this is the least romantic thing I can say. And a lot of people are gonna be like, skirt? What? Like, this was going in such a like romantic direction. But for me, the most romantic thing that I needed from Jonathan before he proposed to me, I was like, I need to know that divorce is on the table. Do not propose to me unless divorce is on the table. I'm not saying I want to get divorced. I'm not saying I think we would get divorced. But I want to feel married to myself and my growth, and I want you to feel like that. And I want that to be the North Star. And so I just don't want to feel trapped ever. Right. And he was like, I love you enough to let you divorce me. If you feel at any point that I can't make you happy or that we're not making each other happy, but I'm pretty confident I can keep you happy. And I was just like, that's like the most romantic thing I've ever said. So like that, honestly, that conversation was pivotal for us. Like that really made me feel like we're not just two kids in love floating into this fantasy of marriage where our feet are on the ground, our eyes are open. We've lived life. We know who we are. We know what we want. And we know that if at some point it doesn't work out, we can be that honest with each other. And I think because of that, we'll never get divorced.
Right. I think the common thread between all of these conversations is finding someone that values you, sees you, appreciates you, and is kind. And I talk to my single girlfriends that have this checklist, like, he's got to be over 6 feet tall. And I'm like, literally none of that matters. And it is totally not important to finding a life partner. You want someone that you can build a life with. And I think that all of your stories really highlight that. I do want to hear, Elaine, from you about how having kids changes the family dynamic.
Sorry, I forgot all about that question.
No, because, it's interesting. Even I've heard Michelle Obama talk about how challenging it was the years that they were raising their daughters in the White House. And I think parenthood makes your relationship stronger in a lot of ways, but it's also, if we're going to be very honest, it puts a lot of strain and challenge on relationships as well. And I feel like, I don't know, I think we're starting to have more conversations about it, but you don't hear about it as much.
Yeah. I mean, I'm like, ask me after baby number 2.
Well, that's also I'd love to hear from you about, because I'm thinking, okay, we've figured it out with one, and we take turns. I'm sure maybe Jonathan is with your son now. Like we've figured out our balance, but then you introduce a second child.
Yeah.
That's more stress.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I do have concerns about like what's going to happen when you add another human to this equation. I think we are in such a great flow with our one baby, and I think we thought we were going to be one and done. So like this is an adjustment for us, but one that we're like excited to explore. For us, I would say I don't want to, how do I word this? I almost feel pressured to say it's harder with the kid because that seems like the thing people say. But in my experience, and I don't want to set people up for failure, which is why I hesitate to be like this honest about it. But I really feel like our partnership, maybe because it was so fully baked before we got married and then before we had a child, that there was such a sense of partnership already that it really felt and feels like throw us anything and like we'll figure out how to manage it in a way that ultimately even makes us closer. And that's what parenthood has been like for us. Like I think it's amazing I was nervous about that though when I was pregnant the first time. I didn't want to share him with anyone, and I was like, it's like we could not have a better life together. Why are we gonna go mess it up and like have a baby? Like, oh man, what is this gonna do? Are these like the end of our good days, Yeah. But then it got even better with the baby, and we have someone that we both love more than anything.
Right.
That's a piece of both of us. And as cheesy as it sounds, every night all we do is just recap what the baby did and and compare notes and giggle about him and like we get glassy-eyed over how much we love him. It's the most beautiful extension and expansion of our love. And so I can't say that it's been a bad thing for our relationship to have a baby. It's been a beautiful thing. And like I feel really grateful. If anything, I feel like I love him even more because I see how his love is nurturing the thing that matters more to me than anything, and how this child is going to be forever shaped by this man's love, and how lucky is this child to have this man as his father. Like I'm so grateful to see him as a dad, and I think he's going to be an amazing dad of 2. But I guess the challenge would be time. But even that, like we put the baby down and then we laugh together, or we catch up, we talk. And I think his commitment to self-care, he's better at it than I am. Like Jonathan will get up at 5 a.m. and go to the gym.
Wow.
Because he needs his time, and he needs to like do what he needs to do to stay like feeling good for the family. So he does those things. I'm not as good as that. I don't really have a great balance with my work life. So anyway, I don't know. I'm curious what your experience has been though with this. Like did having a baby shift your dynamic in a way that was challenging in any way?
I think it strengthened our dynamic, so I definitely relate to that. But I do think that it is challenging, especially you brought up work and career.
Yeah.
You and I both love to work.
We do.
We're both hardworking women. And even as I've been traveling, I get DMs from people. I don't know if this happens to you. People will be like, you need to sit down. Like, you're about to have a baby. Like, you're doing a lot. And I'm like, as long as I feel good, I'm going to work and I'm going to continue to work. But I think that when you enjoy working and then you there's sacrifices you have to make. Sometimes you've got to call nannies more often. Sometimes it's hard and it's difficult to balance. I'm curious what you observed from your mom growing up about work, balancing career and family that has motivated you to, because I think, Elaine, you have a very strong work ethic. And we're going to also talk about the work you're doing for Birth Fund. But you are a hard worker. And I think that's one of the things that I really admire about you. And I see a lot of myself in you in that sense. But working hard and having a family is not always easy.
I think thank you for saying that. And it comes down to your partner, who you chose.
Right.
I totally relate to what you said. And I think back to some of those like Mr. Big characters from my past. And I go, thank you, God, that I didn't choose that. Because there's no world in which I could work the way I work if I had somebody who was half in and, obsessed with himself in the mirror and like just not as present as Jonathan is as a partner. So thank God that I chose well in marriage. And I don't think I have a great sense of balance. And that's something that I'm going to have to continue to work on for the rest of my life. I'm grateful that I have a partner who will mirror to me when maybe I need to. He will never tell me to slow down. He knows better, but he will remind me to take better care of myself for the family. And I really, because he's so respectful of my relationship to work, when he rings the alarm, I honor it and I listen, and it means something to me and it gets through. So I feel challenged. This is an area of my life where I feel really challenged. Like right now I'm about to go into my last week of work before I take maternity leave. And like as a founder, that's something that's really hard. I feel like I gave birth to a baby already this year. I birthed Birth Fund 6 months ago. And I feel thankfully I've done the work to put the right folks in place and the right systems in place to where like I feel like this baby will be in good hands so that I can give birth to the actual baby inside me right now. But it's tough. It's tough when you've built something, you've poured yourself into something, you feel like you're the steward of that thing, to have to reprioritize and let it go and to be present for your family it's not an easy switch. And I actually wish more working moms talked about that, especially when you're an entrepreneur and it's up to you to give yourself maternity leave. I feel extra pressure now as like the founder of an organization called Birth Fund that's about like keeping women, birthing people in their pregnancy healthy and alive through childbirth. Like I have to practice what I preach. I have to model what we represent. And so I feel like added pressure to really like figure out how to take care of myself in this season. But it makes me emotional. Like honestly, like the day that I sent the email to my team, which was a mandate from my midwife to say like, I'm going to have limited work hours starting on this date. You would think I would feel like emancipated and like liberated. This is on my terms. I'm deciding this. But I wrote it and I was like, am I getting choked up? So then like I held off. I like left it in my drafts for like 5 days. And then when I finally sent it, I was like, I need a hug right now. Like, I don't know why I'm so emotional about this. And it's not that I feel stressed about I feel great about the people that I'm leaving it with, but there is something tied to my identity and something tied to the way I live, the way I operate. I wake up, I'm in it.
Right.
Until I go to sleep. And then I take windows to be present with my family. But that's part of my engine. That's like part of my makeup. And I've always been that way. This isn't like, and some people think of like women who are workaholics. They think of women who are hardworking and productive in the world as professionals as like workaholics. And it's like, there's this negative connotation. No one says that about dads.
Ever.
Right?
No.
So there's this guilt or this judgment, even that you feel within, and you have to combat that. Like, I get to work. Like,
and you're passionate about the work that you are doing, which I think motivates you so much more. Question for the moms. How are you feeling about welcoming a second grandchild?
I'm looking very forward to it. First of all, because I never thought it was going to happen. We were so grateful for the first one. Thank you, Lord. We weren't sure we were going to get one. And then there's two. Oh, thank you. I mean, I'm overjoyed. I am. I can't wait. I'm looking very forward to it. Very forward to it.
I can't imagine what it's like to have like I think about how much I love Mavi, and then I think about if he has a child. I mean, how different is it loving your, child versus your grandchild? Is it just like a totally different thing?
It's totally different. I mean, it's totally different. And I never thought I'd be that woman that, you saw me and you ran the other way because you knew I was going to start talking about my grandchild. Because I got stuff to do. I got a full life. But Mavi just is like my joy. And I think, a lot of people, because people know Mavi, I mean, he's like a phenom in and of himself. He's got his own little following of people. It's amazing. The human capacity for love is limitless. And the question I always get is how are you going to be able to love, spoil, spend time with another grandchild like you have with Mavi? And because I have 2 children, like you,
yes.
Deborah, you understand that the heart's capacity just expands for the things that matter to you. And because you were born, and then Alexander was born, and we love you all both. And if I had another child, I would have loved them as well. And so having Mavi, which is a very different thing, and it's different for me because there's so much pride that I have around the way you're raising him. The time, the attention, the love, the respect you give him, that I think when I was growing, you just did things because people asked. You didn't question it. You didn't have a choice. You weren't consulted, No, and I watch how you and Umut manage that, and it's beautiful. And I think that, for me, it's one of me learning from him. I learn when he says, "Why didn't you know that? Why didn't you know that?" He asked me that all the time. Yeah, Mavi, I should have known that. Oh yeah, why you didn't know that? Why you didn't know that? It's yeah, Mavi, let me get on my job. Yeah, I should have known that as your grandmother. And I'm so looking forward to the birth of what we call ice cream, because that's the nickname
he's given her.
that Mavi has given her. And that I know, when someone said, "There's no way you're going to have the time to spoil," it's oh, watch me. Yeah. I am already in love with this ice cream, and she will be a very special part of our lives, like Mavi.
Yeah. So what's changed in parenting from when you both were parents versus what you see Elaine and I doing as your daughters?
The consulting, the conferring with the little human, like it's a little human. We were not treated as little humans. We were to be seen and not heard.
That's right.
Okay. And he is actively involved in everybody. I mean, it's amazing. I also, her level of patience, absolutely, to me, is award-winning. He's a doll, but still, I have to, the way we dealt with 2-year-olds versus the way she deals with 2-year-olds are different. And I realize I'm talking about learning. I'm going to have to stretch some of my skills. Thankfully, my precious grandson is so communicative. And after taking a few of her, paying attention to how she handles him, it's easier for me to adopt some of that. And then some of that, he's going to have to learn that this is Lala. And when Lala says something a certain way, you need to pay attention to Lala because Mama's not here. But right now, it's wonderful. This is my first week here. So I feel like I'm in training to get this dynamic, because between him and her, but so far, so good. And it's something I look forward to. It's a part of growth for me. I look forward to extending my knowledge as a mom and a grandmother in a new direction. It's because I do respect her opinion, because she knows this is her child. You do innately know your child, and I give her that. And I'm I don't want her to think I'm one of we were bulldozed. Our parents were like, there was no question. If my grandmother came in and said something to my dad, he was like, and we loved it. But this is different. We have a different dynamic, and it's one I'm looking forward to trying to work within. I also hope that when I offer my side of the thing, that it'll be considered as well. But we're working it through. We're working through it.
I'm just trying to get invited back. That's my my thing is like that. I raise if that's what you want me to do, if that's what he eats, if that's what I'm going to do it, because I'm just trying to get invited back. And when I was growing up, we talked about the look. I mean, all my mom had to do was look at me a certain way, and I knew to come correct. It's like, don't be out here embarrassing me, or you are going to listen to me. And I remember when you were in school, Brooke, and I would hear how some of the the girls, because you went to an all-girls school, Spence in New York, and I would hear how they would talk to their mother, and I was like, I would not have any teeth. I would not be able to walk the next day.
I remember the first time I went to someone's house and I heard them tell their mom to shut up. I was like, what? Like, are you going to be alive after this? She was like, Mom, shut up. And she slammed her door. And I was like, oh my God. People have very different home dynamics.
Not that you grew up, we never hit you or anything like that.
No,
like
of course
when you said
not.
you're going to be alive. I just want to make sure of that.
Make sure.
Yeah, just basic level of respect.
It was it was, and we do, like Deborah said, we were not consulted. You were told, and you also felt that people had your best interest. You knew you wanted to comport yourself in a way that would make your parents happy. You didn't want to be a problem. You didn't want to be, getting shouted at and things like that. So, but it really is. I am learning about when I'm with Mavi and what he wants, and I love this because he doesn't abuse it. He uses it, and it helps him be a critical thinker about what's important to him and how someone can't control him and make him do things. He has an ability to give consent.
Yes, absolutely. Okay, final question for everyone here on the couch. When do you feel most beautiful?
You ask that question, and I hear people say, when I'm getting out of the shower, I feel beautiful when I look good. When I got on makeup and clothes and heels and my hair's laid, I feel beautiful. That is when I feel the most beautiful.
I second that emotion. I absolutely do. I enjoy makeup. I enjoy hair, and I love all that. And yes, that is when I feel most beautiful. And also when my daughter says so.
Same. What they said. I don't think I've ever actually sat and considered that question. It seems like a common question, but the most truthful answer is with these two dynamic, the women that we came from, they're telling the truth. That's true. I really think when my hair is done, when I have a nice little outfit on, my makeup is done.
Today.
Thank you. Thank you. So that's my answer.
Yes. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you all so much for sharing so openly. I feel like I learned so much from just this one conversation. And I think this is going to be a great episode for everyone listening at home, just to get this motherly wisdom across generations.
Thank you for the generosity of your questions. This was fun.
Thank you.
Next time we're turning the tables on you, though.
Yes,
that's right.
Okay, we can do that next time. All right. Thank you all so much for listening.
Thank you, Brooke.